Hello and welcome to our new series on the Juno Video Magnifier. We're going to be doing this series about the various aspects of the Juno and how to utilize it to best effect with your students. You might notice, if you have vision, that this tutorial is a little different than many I have done in the past in that it's based off of a PowerPoint rather than a live video. And the reason for this is because it's really hard, at least where I am in the equipment that I've got, to use that to record a screen because of the glare and different issues with that. So that's kind of why we're going ahead and doing it from a PowerPoint. So with that settled, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you're going to want to know is what's in the box. Well, it comes obviously with the Juno magnifier itself, with what they're calling a rotating barrel camera, and we'll talk about what that means. The box also has a zippered pouch carrying case, and it's padded with a shoulder strap. There's a video magnifier user guide and quick start in there. This screen says, and it's in the user manual too, it's called the Qualcomm Quick Charge 3.0 USB-C 110 to 120 volt AC power adapter. That is a very fancy way of saying the thing that plugs into the cord that plugs into the wall. So don't be thrown off by the jargon or the language that you might not know. The unit also comes with two cords. One is a USB Type-C cable, and that's used for charging with the aforementioned item that plugs into the wall. And the last cord is an HDMI to mini HDMI cable, which is used for displaying what shows up on the Juno's camera on maybe an external display. So this next slide is an overview of the front screen buttons, and we're just going to talk about those very briefly, not necessarily what they do, and we're just going to orient to the unit a little bit. So if you hold the unit with the screen facing you and the buttons facing you and the rotating camera, and you'll know what I mean by rotating camera, facing in the up position, we're just going to orient to the unit a bit. So that rotating camera, that barrel camera, is what we were talking about earlier when we talked about the barrel. So you'll see that it rotates towards you and away from you. If you move your hand to the upper left corner button, it's a sort of a grayish background with a white sort of button on there, and it has a power symbol on the upper left. This is the power button. This will turn the unit off and on. It will also put it in standby and take it out of standby. There are two buttons below the power button. They are the color mode up and down buttons. They are blue in color with black arrows pointing up for the top button and down to the bottom from the bottom button. These cycle through the color modes. If you move your hand to the top camera barrel and move it to the right this time, and around that upper right corner is a red button with a black camera symbol on it. That is the capture button. That's used to capture a image, and we'll talk about how to use that. Below that capture button are two yellow buttons, each with a symbol, the top one with a plus and the bottom with a minus. These buttons are the magnification in and out buttons. They increase or decrease the magnification. So it's a pretty good overview of what that is. Okay, now let's look at the side view of the ports and hardware. If you look on the left side, and it's in this recessed compartment that feels like it's like in a little bit more, it's recessed, and there's several ports in here. The top port, which is the furthest away from you and the furthest on the top, is the audio jack. You can tell because it's, circular, just like an audio jack would be. You just plug a set of headphones in there and you could hear your menus and things in your headphones instead of through the speaker. The next port down is the USB-C port. This port is used for charging. So you're going to plug the cord into that and then the other end into either the wall or a computer to charge. A computer will work to charge it, and we'll talk about that a little later. The last port on the bottom is the HDMI mini port. That is the port you would use to plug the Juno in to another display and display what is seen through the camera on that other display. The final thing on the bottom is not a port, but it's important to know what it is because you can feel it pretty well. It's the charging light, the LED. It lets you know when the unit is being charged or when it's on for those who have vision to see it. Of note also is at the back of the unit, there's this stand that pulls completely out for the unit to position the unit and to have it stand on its own. Here are just some notes on the battery and charging that are kind of important to know about before you use the unit too much. You would power the unit on by pressing the power button for 3 seconds or until you see the Juno logo or hear a prompt. I honestly think it's closer to 5 sometimes, so don't panic if it's been 3 seconds and you don't hear or see anything. I really feel like it takes just a couple of seconds longer. The next item is that the Juno can be used continuously for right around 3 hours. And, that's, more or less continuously, give or take. The battery status is displayed in the upper left corner, but only when the on-screen menus are activated, and we will look at that. This is where the low battery notification is also, so just as a FYI. The unit will take about 3 hours to charge fully. It charges faster when it's not in use. So if you have it on standby, and we'll talk about that, or powered off, it charges faster. It also charges faster when plugged into the wall than plugged into a computer. You can charge it on a computer, but it just doesn't charge quite as fast. So again, standby versus powering down. We said we would talk about this. So to completely power down the unit, just like to power it up, you're going to press and hold that power button until there are tones indicating that it's powered down, or it's really kind of snazzy. And like I said, it takes more like 5 seconds. But again, don't worry if it doesn't happen within the time frame. Just keep holding it down until the tones are heard. If you tap the power button instead of holding it down, it puts the unit in what's called standby. That means that the screen is automatically turned off and it's reserving power. If you leave the unit sit, it will go into standby mode after about 5 minutes of inactivity. The unit will not power itself completely off, though. So one thing I'm very careful to tell people is if a student leaves it on their desk in standby mode, it's still using some power. It's not using as much power, but it's still using some because it's available to be woken up really quickly. So that student may come back the next day to either a dead unit or a unit that is pretty low on charge. So that's important to know that if a student, it's not something you want to leave permanently on standby, they're going to want to shut it completely off when they're going to be gone and away from it for a length of time. The Juno also wakes up from standby mode a lot faster than it does when it's powered up. So that is the advantage of putting it in standby mode. It's just much more efficient if you're going between classes or are taking a short break to go get a drink or something like that. But if it's like a full class period or more, I would completely power the unit down. Here are some tips on how to use the Juno and position it. And if you can see the screen, you'll see how the Juno is physically positioned to take advantage of these various positions of the Juno to do these tasks. The first task is talking about reading printed material. To read printed material like magazines, catalogs, things like that, paperbacks, textbooks, you're going to extend the stand and the camera is going to be put down. You need to lay the document or the item down, lay it flat down on the surface or as flat as you can get it. And you're going to need to put the legs on top of the document. The camera needs to point straight down. And because the camera does not move right or left, you need to physically move the unit across the material that you're reading. So that's kind of important to know to do that. The Juno can also be used for text recognition. The best way to capture an image is to close the stand, which are the legs, so make it completely flat, and hold the device completely flat again with your screen up. The camera will automatically rotate to that down position and face the item that you're trying to scan. You're going to want to hold the Juno about 8 inches above the page and and have it positioned that way. It does take some vision to do it efficiently and effectively, but realistically, if you have no vision at all or very little, it still can be done with some training on how to hold the unit when you're scanning. There's a lot of more information on text recognition later on in this presentation. You can also use the Juno for distance viewing. To do that, you can, there's a difference. There's two different sort of distance and spotting things that it talks about. And this talks about distance viewing. So you're going to extend that stand again and sit that unit at an angle where you can see best whatever you're trying to view at a distance, like a whiteboard or a sign on the wall, a word wall or something like that. And you're going to point that camera where the item is that you're trying to read. Now, please keep in mind that the camera, as before, does not rotate right and left. You're going to need to physically move that unit to the left or to the right to line it up with what you're trying to look at. The Juno can also be used for handwriting or hobbies. As an aside, I find handwriting and hobbies really a challenge to do under the Juno, and it takes a little bit more work. Some students are willing to put that work in because they really want to be able to do these things under the Juno. Other students are less likely to want to do that. So just be aware as we progress and move forward. You're going to place your paper behind the device. So the legs are going to be out. The device is going to be having a camera pointing down, and you're going to kind of direct that camera onto where you want that writing. You're going to be able to work on things like hobbies. You can do spot checking on things, stuff like that. You can use the Juno for self-view, and we all know how that every single one of our kids is going to grab that thing and roll that barrel towards them and make a funny face in that camera, and that's perfectly fine. It's a good way of introducing them to the idea that can happen and telling them, hey, you can use this for functional things like, putting on makeup or shaving or whatever floats your boat. You're going to kind of be able to do that. So functional tasks. As an FYI, that LED light does shut off when the camera is in self-view. That's not a problem. You don't have to worry about having that light shine directly into the student's eyes. It will automatically shut off. And that's for, obviously, safety reasons. The unit can also be used for spotting. And we call it spotting because we don't take the legs down. It's held in an upright position with the screen facing you. And you can use it to point the camera at things that you want to look at, zoom in and zoom out, do all of those things that you need, and hold it steady. You can use it to take a picture of something in this position as well, just like with the other positions. It's good for, this is a good way of reading labels or tags where you can't put the tag actually underneath the unit, but you can position the unit so that you can read the tag. Things like on shelves if you're out shopping, or even signs that you can't see because they're too far away, things like that. Just a really quick note about the buttons and the menus. This is really super important to know. By default, when you take the unit out of the box, all of the icons and the buttons, when they're touched, their names are spoken aloud, and it doesn't activate the button. This is for those with very low vision or totally blind, so that helps them navigate the device. When the menus are talking, you need to double tap the chosen button or icon in order to activate it. This is extremely important to know. It takes a minute to get used to the idea. If you can read the menus and are also hearing them, we can talk about how to disable those menus another time, but this is how the unit comes out of the box. Right away, you have to double tap everything in order for it to work. The only exception is the power button. If you tap the power button once, it will go into standby. You don't have to tap it twice. So let's talk about these physical buttons now that we've sort of looked at the overview. And this is just a second overview of these buttons, an image, and talks about where they are on the unit. Like we have earlier, these buttons are physical and they don't change. Buttons that we talk about later will be on-screen buttons, and they are what they're going to call context dependent, or they're dependent on what's, what you're looking at in the unit, and they will change. So that's kind of important. And this is the part where we're going to talk about that. When you're in live mode, the Juno screen will look similar to the image below, and which is just a picture of the Juno, except it has a very small square in the lower left-hand corner, and it's got 2 arrows pointing to the right. And this is the restore button is what they're calling it. And of course, you need to double tap it to show those menus that are on screen, and it hides them when this button is out of view. To increase and decrease the magnification, we talked about where those buttons are located, but let's review. They are in the lower part of the right-hand side of the unit, and they are orange or maybe yellow in color. I'm not really quite sure, but they're sort of in that range. So you can hold these buttons down to change the magnification. The top button, obviously, that's directly underneath the capture button is the magnification up or increased magnification, or decreased is at the very bottom right. You can activate these buttons when in live mode or once an image has been captured. So if an image has been captured, you want to zoom in on a spot, you can use these buttons in that captured image or captured text as well. The change color mode buttons, and we've talked about these as well, but as a review, they are on the left side, and they are sort of a light blue in color with arrows on them, and they are the bottom 2 buttons on the left. They take up a good portion of that side. The default colors are always available, the true color and grayscale, but other modes can be added in the options, and we'll talk about how to do that. But what will happen is if you press the button real quick, if you press the up button or down button, it cycles through those options. If you press that button, it'll tell you what the next color scheme is when the menus are talking. And then if you press it again, that color scheme is activated. So again, you would need to double press that button to move between those colors. And again, these also work in both live and save modes. Unit that we're going to talk about today. In the next video, we're going to talk about the on-screen layout and the on-screen menu buttons. I hope this video has been helpful for you. Please feel free to subscribe or let us know in the comments how we're doing if you have questions or if you would like to see content that we have not yet focused on. Thanks very much and have a great day.